Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. We've been keeping a seat warm for you. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so happy that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We don't want you to miss an episode, so please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is the author of What Would You Wish For, David Sable. Before David joins us, I want to invite you to check out my brand new podcast that I'm producing with my partner in exploration, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. It's called Solve It for Kids. It is a podcast that is designed for kids and parents to listen to together. And it's amazing. We speak to all sorts of scientists, engineers, astronauts, aquanauts, artists, musicians, magicians. It's incredible. What we do is we talk to these amazing people and we ask them how they solve problems in the field using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. It's a great show for kids and parents to listen to together. It's a great show for kids and grandparents, kids and their uncles and aunts and significant adults in their life. It's just a great show. Check it out. Go to our website, solveitforkids.com. Joining us on the line right now from the greater New York City area, he is the author of a really important book called What Would You Wish For? Please welcome to the show, David Sable. David, how are you?
I'm good. So good to see you, even distanced as we are in the age of COVID.
I know. I'm imagining, it's a difficult time for folks, but just imagine if we were in this quarantine lockdown situation, we didn't have technology that allowed us to have some kind of face-to-face communication with the people that we love.
I can't even imagine it. I think back to, I had COVID early on. Mm-hmm. Thank God I came through it relatively easily. And I became obsessed with reading about pandemics in history. And the truth is that they often got worse, and they often just exponentially got worse because people didn't know about the need to lock down. And, there was a time during the Middle Ages when penitents would go from city to city in groups of 2,000 thinking that was the way to get over, because clearly, in their view, this must have been a punishment from God. So the penitents would leave their city where people were dying and go to the next city to try to get more penitents. But meanwhile, 3/4 of them died on the way, and then they got then they reinfected that next city, and this kept going on. And so I think the ability for us to be locked down and to have this kind of communications is powerful.
Yeah.
I think it's a blessing.
Yeah, it really is. And it brings up, the title of your book, What Would You Wish For? I remember being a kid almost 100 years ago and wishing for this, this technology, remembering watching the Batman and Dick Tracy cartoons where they're talking into their wrists, and the Star Trek communicators and all of that stuff. And it just, it excited me so much that maybe someday that was possible. And now we're living in that reality.
Yeah, I think about that a lot as well. I think about it every time. I like to game. I'm a bit of a digital gamer. And every time I do it, I think when I was a kid, I would think about, wow, wouldn't it be cool if, imagine that I could create that world. Imagine that I could actually play in that world that I was creating, whether I was playing with my blocks or, my little toy soldiers or whatever it was. And now here we are in a world where almost everything that we wish for is actually here. Mm-hmm. So I often wonder, what are the kids going to wish for? Because they don't seem to be wishing quite in the same way, which is part of one of the reasons that I wrote the book. But I do believe that we're lucky. I mean, we are in a world where so much of the things that we imagined when we were younger have come true.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting to bring up that point that kids these days don't seem to be wishing the same way that we did. I read in a study one time that said the kids who have dreams and goals and aspirations and wishes did so much better in school. And so for a couple of weeks, I did this very, very informal study where I would be in front of an audience and I would ask the kids, how many kids here have a dream? How many kids think one day I want to be this? And it doesn't matter if it changes. It's just something that you're wishing for, you're thinking about, you're dreaming about. And I was shocked to see how few kids would raise their hands. You know, it was never more than 50% of the kids would say that they had a dream.
Yeah, it's funny. I think there's dreams and there's wishes. I think that, one of the things that I noticed, and I think that that's what really got me started on this, is that today, like, what are kids thinking about, right? They want to be the next social media star. They want to have everything. They want to know that they have everything. And so when I started to think about the book, it originally began, I thought, wow, imagine like a genie gave you 3 wishes. What would you wish for? And that's all you could have. And you couldn't do the last wish being, I want 3 more wishes. Just what are the 3 wishes, right? And the truth is that as I started asking kids, and I realized that they weren't paying attention to the consequences of their wishes. And I think that that's really at the core of everything that we've put into the book here. And Emma Yarlett's brilliant illustrations just so bring it to life. This notion of, if I want all the ice cream in the world, that's great, but by implication, nobody else is going to have ice cream. Mm-hmm. If I want the biggest, meanest fort, means that my friends are not going to have the biggest, meanest fort. They're going to have littler forts, and I'm going to be the biggest, meanest, and I'm going to be on top of them. If I'm the movie star and I have all the paparazzi, my friends are watching on the periphery, and they're looking in on my life. And so that depressed me, actually. I was thinking, like, wow, like, we just need to, it's okay, like, it's all right. I don't want to put anybody's wishes down. Just understand that there's a consequence. Mm-hmm. There's a consequence to it. So maybe you don't want all the ice cream in the world. Maybe you want all the ice cream in the world so you can share it.
Yeah. That's a fascinating way to look at that. And you're right. If you get your wish and you have all the ice cream in the world, that's it. You have it. No one else has it. And I guess that's one thing we don't talk to kids about enough, is that idea of what are you wishing for and what do you wish that the world has? What do you wish for the world?
Yeah. What do you wish for the world? What is your view of what's going to happen in the world? Like, what do you think? But I think that the operative piece here is that we say, what would you wish for? What would you do? Because when I read the book and when I talk to children about it, I tell them it's not just about wishing. See, it's not just about sitting there thinking, okay, this is what I want to do. It's what are you going to do to make it happen? So if you want peace and love and joy for all the girls and boys, well, let me tell you, you got to work at it. Mm-hmm. You got to make it happen. If you want to make sure that nobody goes hungry, that's not that you just sit there and wish for it. You have to do it. You have to make it happen, right? It's the old pray to God and row to shore. It's like you have to be the person who makes it happen. You have to be the operative in the equation here, because if you're not, just sitting and wishing is great, but that's like navel gazing.
Right.
Nothing happens.
Yeah.
And so I want it clear that it's up to us as parents, and I think we forget too sometimes. I really do. I think that we as parents forget that it's not about wishing, it's about wishing just sort of gives you that's your goal. Mm-hmm. But to get to shore, you gotta row the boat.
Gotta put
and
the
so
work in there.
I want people to know that. I want them to be rowing the boat. I don't want them to take it lightly.
You're an incredibly successful business person. What was it that inspired you to take this message to kids?
So why did I take this to kids? I guess there's a lot of reasons. I grew up, my dad was a rabbi. And so when you grow up as the child of a rabbi or a minister, it's all the same. I've talked to all my friends from all the different religions. We all kind of had that same kind of upbringing where you understand the value of communications in the most positive way. Like, how do you communicate a positive message, and how do you communicate? I spent my early years listening to my father preach every Saturday to the congregation and give them messages that hopefully people would act on. And so as I thought about what I wanted to do with my writing, because I write a lot, somebody had come to me and said, we'd like you to write a business book. And I thought about it, and I wrote a couple of chapters, and then finally I just threw it away. And I said, you know what? Nobody wants to read my business book. It's just so many of them. I post my blog. I have a big following. My business writing is done the way I want it to do. I don't think because a book kind of forces you to a slice in time that gets stale very quickly. I just felt like nobody wanted to read that. And then I just started to think about, wow, I have this huge opportunity, if I can, to turn my creativity towards a message that I believe in. And so I've spent my life making sure that my business life and my private life and my family life and my public life were all driven by some kind of purpose. And so the ability to turn that into a children's book spoke to me. I wrote it. I tried it. I wanted to see where it would go, and here it is. As I was lucky, I was able to do it, and it seems to be resonating with people.
Yeah. Now, one of the things in What Would You Wish For is you're inspiring kids not only to wish, but then to take action. Are you able to reach those kids who find themselves in situations where they feel powerless? Their parents are struggling to make sure that they have enough food to eat. And are you able to empower those kids?
That is such a good question. I hope so. Mm-hmm. I hope so. I think that's part of the problem that we have in life, right? Because who are the kids we know it, right? We know that those are the most vulnerable. Those are the ones who have the least ability to wish and to think and to try to, and so yeah, I hope that I can. I hope that they are. I hope people are reading it to them. It always concerns me because you got to buy a book. Now, I've done some readings. Interestingly enough, I've done some readings over the past bunch of months, all online, of course. Mm-hmm. And I was really touched that a number of public schools in areas of lesser economic development, if you will, mm-hmm. were calling me and asking me to read. And I found those kids, interestingly enough, to be the most engaged. They were the ones who they got it. They understood it. Once you're able to inspire a child, they understand it and they feel it and they understand that, wow, look what I can do. Mm-hmm. Look how I can, if I really think about it, maybe I can break out. Maybe I can change the status quo. And I think that's important.
I think that's, I was going to say, I think that's incredibly important. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please follow through.
No, I was going to say, I've been mindful of this my whole life. My late grandfather was an immigrant who came from Russia. He escaped the pogroms, came to America, worked hard his whole life, was basically a, poor man, not poverty driven, but, it was not middle class, upper middle class. He was, lived in a little town upstate New York, joined the U.S. Army, fought in World War I because he was so grateful to the country that had taken him in, and he was able to, get citizenship, which was great. Mm-hmm. And my uncle and my father all served in the armed forces. So my grandfather always said, he didn't know the word entitlement. I don't think he ever heard the word entitlement. in his life. He spoke a mixture of English, Russian, Yiddish. But he said, the world owes you nothing. He said, never make that mistake. The world owes you nothing. You owe the world. And that's been driving me. That's driven me my whole life. This notion of there's no entitlement. Mm-hmm. And so I think that when I speak to kids like that, they get it more than I get it because they have no entitlement. Mm-hmm. But when you're able to take that and turn that into a power for them, the fact that you don't have entitlement, that you can't feel the entitlement, is almost a lever for you. Because now nobody owes you anything. You got to make it. You got to do it. You got to dig in for it. And I know that sounds patronizing, but it's not. It really isn't. Because I think that that's the only way. And again, it's not that we don't help and we don't have safeguards and we don't look for the right programs and all the things that we can do to help people. But I think that unless everybody understands that it's what would you wish for, what would you do, mm-hmm. we're just going to continue down the path of looking at the movie star and self-fulfillment as being the only measure of success, as opposed to being able to reach out and help the world.
That's a really important thing, and it's something that I worry about sometimes when I see kids on social media, and what they value is, that they get so many likes, and so many of the social influencers that kids are looking up to are just pretty people who are taking pictures and posting them. Does that worry you that we're going in an opposite direction of how you're hoping to inspire kids?
Totally. It worries me all the time. And it's not just kids, it's the parents too. Wow. It's I look and I wonder sometimes at, and I don't mean to be critical of anyone in particular, but I look at people like, a family like the Kardashians, and I say to myself, how is it? Like, I'm even saying their name. Like, how could that possibly be? Like, when did that happen? When did that happen that we sort of started to look at people who didn't have, there was a time that our heroes, and certainly when you go back in history, like look who the heroes who stayed heroes, mm-hmm. right? I think about this all the time, right? And I look at, people say, like, how do you stay creative? What do you do? And some people say, well, you have to learn how to code and you have to learn this. I say, no. If you really want to be creative, then you have to understand how to connect with people. But I said, how is it that after thousands of years, people are still reading the Bible and the Quran? People are reading the Iliad and the Odyssey, Shakespeare, Sherlock Holmes, Harry Potter, Star Wars. Like, how come these things resonate? And they resonate because people connect with them. And the heroes in there, whether they're the heroes of the Bible, whether they're the heroes of Greek myths or whatever, these were heroes who were bigger than life. They were people that we looked at and said, wow, these people are doing big things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And more often than not, those big things had something to do with saving the world or saving people or saving themselves or their family. And yet now it's like, okay, our heroes are people who just sit around all day and post pictures of themselves. And it's like, wow, like, where have we gone wrong?
Boy, you're right. You're absolutely right. I ask myself those questions many, many times, and I'm amazed. I love story, and that is, when I'm spending time in the media, that's typically what I'm doing is story and finding out about people. But I am shocked with the would just watch these 5 women argue with each other for the next 3 months. That doesn't compute with me at all. What can we, other than sharing and reading What Would You Wish For with our kids, what other kind of things do you think we can do to help our families, and not necessarily the world, but a parent who's listening to this? How can we work with our kids to get our families work in the right direction so that we have our focus on people and making the world a better place while we're also making our lives better?
So I think empathy. Empathy is the critical, I believe, empathy is the critical missing factor in a lot of what's happening in the world today. Honestly, I don't care what anybody's politics are. My politics are mine. Your politics are yours. The world has always been divided by, call it politics, call it different kinds of opinions. That's fine. That's what makes the world go round, right? I don't mind that. You know, some of my best friends have political views that are way, way different than mine. And that's fine. They can still be my close friends because they're good people. I think the problem is that we've crossed the line here because we've lost empathy. And when you lose empathy, you're just in a bad place. And so, I mean, just look at what's happening with all of the protests, and we've lost empathy. There are people who have lost empathy for the cause. So they don't see the cause because they've lost the empathy. So what they see are maybe the people at the peripheries. And yes, there was looting and there was violence. But the truth is, when you get into the story, what you find out, you got professional criminals and you had people who were just agitators. But then you have this big mass in the middle of people who just really believe in something. I want to have empathy for those people. I want those people to feel my empathy, and I want to feel their empathy. And I think that when we put ourselves in that category, when we put ourselves in those, in other people's shoes and think about it, not from the political side, but from the human side, I think it truthfully changes the world. You know, I'll give you a great example. I'm on the board of UNICEF USA. And a little more than a year ago, we went down to San Diego, and then we went down to Mexico, and we followed the immigrant trail. And it was fascinating. These people weren't criminals. They weren't the dregs of society. And on the contrary, the sad truth is that, forget the criminals, that's a separate issue, but the people who are the poorest never leave because they don't have upward mobility. The people who are on the road are the people who have dreams. That's the thing, right? These are people who have a vision in their head of something better. So they have the wherewithal, even if they don't have the money to really they have the wherewithal to get up and to try to better their lives and better their children's lives. And so we came to the court, and part of being there was that we went to the courts and we were listening to what was happening with the immigrant courts. And so these are people who are coming in who are asking for asylum, and this is the court proceeding. So the truth is that I approached it with a bit of cynicism, thinking that, oh yeah, you know, we've read all about these courts and, you know, my political affiliation being what it is, thinking this is going to be a really terrible situation. This judge, because he represented a particular political party, would be terrible. Turns out it was exactly the opposite. Now, it's not true all the time, and it's not true all the time for any party, right? There's good people and there are bad people every place. This judge took his responsibility for his position so seriously that I literally almost cried in the court. He was very clear, and so at one point, it was so fascinating. He asked the question of this child, and it's all through an interpreter, and I turned to the person I was with, and I said, look at that. Why is he asking that? Why is he asking something else? You can see he's anti-immigrant. And the woman said to me, no, you don't understand. It's exactly the opposite. Because if he asked the question you're thinking he should ask, the government's lawyer would jump on that. And it's really not relevant to today. So what he's actually done is he's saved that kid. But that's good jurisprudence. And so that just made me realize, wow, like think about that. Here, this man transcended the political bias and went with his job, which was to be a judge and to fairly follow the law. And he did. And I was inspired when I walked out of it. I wrote a lot about it. I was inspired when I walked out of it. So I want to be inspired by people who have different political views, who have different religious views, who have different whatever, but all have the same social view, meaning that people are people, right? We all come from the same beginnings someplace. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we have to find empathy for each other.
You used a phrase earlier that I used to hear a lot growing up. I don't hear it a lot now, and that idea of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. And I think that's such an important lesson for us to share with our kids.
I think it is, but let me add a twist to that.
Okay.
Because I think it's hard to do. So one of the things that I've been talking about and writing about during this pandemic is that, because you see all over, we're all in the same boat. We're all in this together. And I say, no, we're not. See, let's be clear. We're in the same storm, but we're all in different boats. Some of us are in small, fast boats, but some of us are in leaky kayaks. Mm-hmm. And so our job as human beings is to find safe harbor for everybody. Our job is to make sure that that leaky kayak gets to a safe harbor the same way the big boat does, big luxury boat does. And that's fair, because we're not all going to be in the same boat. Mm-hmm. It's never going to happen.
Right.
But we can get to the same harbor because the storm is the same. Mm-hmm. And I think we miss that sometimes. And so that's sort of like my twist on so I want to be empathetic in that I'm on the big boat and you're in the leaky boat. I want to be empathetic and say, wow, like, imagine that I was on that boat. That's kind of being in your shoes. But I need to understand that we're not in it together. Mm-hmm. You're in it in a completely different way than I am. And I think that that's the key of walking in your shoes or being in your shoes. We're not in it together. Mm-hmm. But the harbor has to be the same, using my boat analogy.
Yeah, that's a message that we've shared a lot here in the podcast during this pandemic, during this storm. And it is so important to remember that we are all in the same storm. We're not on the same boat. And it would be wonderful if we can find ways when we're on that big, secure boat to reach down and help the folks in that leaky kayak make it to that safe harbor. And I'm hoping that your book, What Would You Wish For, is something that's going to serve as an inspiration, as a starting point. One of the things that I saw is that all of the royalties that you are due from What Would You Wish For are all going to be donated to UNICEF. What made you make that decision?
I felt that this was my first book, my first children's book. I felt that, authors, it's not what I make my living from. It wasn't what I was thinking of making my living from. And I just felt that it gave me inspiration as I was writing it, and I hope that it inspired people who read it to think about that. And, I just felt that if I was going to be real to myself and real to what I was writing, that what would you wish for what you do? I wish for that. I wish for a world of peace. I wish for a world where nobody goes hungry. So what would you do? I'm going to give my royalties to UNICEF, and just in that little way, make some kind of a mark on it.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you just said, well, this was my first book. Does that give us confidence that maybe there's a second and a third coming from David Sable?
I hope so. If, the people who read this book, if the people who like it will post for me on Amazon and leave me reviews. So readers, I ask you as a favor, it's very helpful for authors. But I do hope to, I have one that I'm working on that I hope to release in the next week, where I decided I was going to do a video book. It's short, but I think it speaks to the time. I'll send it to you. It'll be out in the next couple of weeks. A friend of mine who's an actor read it, and we've just finished editing the images behind it. And it speaks to the times, and I think you'll see it has the same kind of a feeling. It's just sort of this notion of, what do I see when I look at you? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important. Just this whole notion of how do I view people, and what do I see when I see you? And then I have another one I'm working on about words. So I hope so.
Well, I'm real excited, and that whole idea of coming together, having empathy, what do I see when I see you? Hopefully that we see each other as part of the same beautiful human family, and as a person that can help lift me up, and as someone that I need to help lift up. I've had a great time speaking to you today. David, is there a place online where folks can go to find out more about you and find out more about What Would You Wish For?
Yeah, the best place to go to find out about What You Wish For is go to Amazon and get the book. About me, LinkedIn. I write on LinkedIn. That's sort of my big outlet, and I'm followed by many people, and I welcome anybody who's interested. I have a little newsletter that comes out on LinkedIn called Imagine, and it's called Imagine because I say that more important than the answers are the questions. So if you can imagine the questions, you'll get to more interesting answers.
Awesome.
And I really believe that. So I think, I think people who will read me there will see sort of the same kind of a drive that I have. So even when I write about business or I post about business, I always try to take it from the human point of view. Mm-hmm. And I believe people first is my mantra. I think that's critical.
Absolutely.
So I'm always out there.
Absolutely. Well, we've had a fascinating time talking to David Sable. He is the author of What Would You Wish For, and hopefully the author of more children's books to come, and we'll have him back on the show. David, thanks so much for being part of our show today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Manny Nunez, the author of Noah and Baby Dragon. It's a really, really fun interview. First-time author, debut author from right here in Massachusetts. Had such a great time speaking to him. And he's a dad, and he loves being a dad. And I love speaking to him about it. Hey, if you are the author of a great children's book, I bet you're finding it hard to promote it right now because you can't do the school visits. You can't do library visits, book signings. I hear they're happening outside, but the competition for them must be incredible. And really, how many folks are going to book signings outside? Probably not a lot. We have something that could help. It's called the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Program. We have a panel of evaluators, and if they feel that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read. And with that status comes a number of wonderful tools that can really help your book stand out from the crowd of books that are published every single month. Check it out today. Go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Author Services button at the top of the page. You'll find out all about it. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guest, David Sable. Please be sure to check out his wonderful book, What Would You Wish For? I also want to thank my incredible team, starting with my producer, Fatima Khan, my awesome author ambassador, Peggy Cotto. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support and love she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy for having my back here in the studio. Most of all, I want to thank you. That's right, you are amazing, and you are making the world a better place every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.